replaced the Eucharist table with a kick drum. We put the kick drum at the center of this, and we said, we are going to sing, which is the sacrament of so many churches now, is singing, which is fantastic, right? It's very formational. But I wonder if there's something formational about this meal, that every time we gather, we're just going to have this thing that's kind of equal ground, whether you're an alto, soprano, you love music, you don't like music, bread and wine.
That's right.
The most simple of simple things. The power pyramid is just leveled out. There's a little funeral, there's a little wedding in every service. There's a little resurrection, but there's a little cross. There's a little waiting.
Yeah, the whole thing.
So people can come suffering, and the Eucharist is going to be a place for them to go, hey, I'm not alone.
The Ferment.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Mike O'Brien. Mike is a worship pastor, songwriter, and the director of the Vineyard School of Worship.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hey, what up, everybody? Adam Russell here, Ferment Podcast. And I have a guest that I work with, but we have not yet had a conversation. Mike O'Brien is with me today.
What's happening?
That's right. Mike is the director of training in Vineyard Worship. And if you have gone to an event in the last, 187 years at the Vineyard, that is somewhat training oriented, you've probably met Mike. And so I was hoping we could maybe just pick up and have a bit of a discussion today, Mike, that kind of overlaps with your world, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Yeah, man. Hey, let's do this first, though. I know that you're from Atlanta, but maybe we should just fill everybody in on the rest of your life and where you came from and how you grew up. Did you grow up in Atlanta?
No, I didn't. I live in Atlanta now, about 20 miles north of Atlanta, with my wife, Susan, and my 8-year-old boy, Ezekiel. But I grew up in Detroit. So I was born and raised in Detroit, Motor City.
Okay.
And I had a Motor City family, right? So everybody kind of works for the car industry. And my father was an alcoholic. Yes. And so they divorced early, parents divorced early. And soon made my way to Atlanta. My mom met a new gentleman and took us to Atlanta. And it was, it was a new day.
How old were you when you went to Atlanta?
10 years old.
Okay.
Yep.
So some of your formational years, at least, that middle school thing was in Atlanta, but your early years were all Detroit.
Yeah. So that's why I don't have a Southern, I might to some have a little Southern twang, but, Susan, my wife, she's a Southern belle for sure. So, but yeah, I've just got these Northern sensibilities. Would spend summers up there and hang out with my father, lived in Atlanta with my mom. Yeah. And it's pretty crazy story of, becoming a Southerner and then, learning that culture and all these things. And my mom, we went with all the intentions of having a new family and a stepfather, but it ended up kind of being a domestic abuse situation. Okay. So I went from divorced parents, and then we were kind of in this very heavy domestic abuse situation. And one day, we just kind of, for whatever reason, we started going to church. We found this little church plant that met in a box.
What kind of church was it?
It was a Presbyterian church, PCA. So we started attending here, and a few weeks after, in this domestic abuse situation, my mother was being abused physically, and it was very painful and horrific and a big deal. And one night we were fearing for our lives. We were worried, so we called the Christians and said, "Christians, what do you do? What do you have for us? Do you have any tips or ideas?" And within an hour, 6 or 7 vans pulled up with all these folks that came and rescued us from this situation, and they I don't know all the details, but, they supported us and paid for things, I'm sure. And so needless to say, I became a Christian
Yes, that's
in
right.
this church. And one of those people that was there to rescue us was Dan Cutchin, who mentored me. So he mentored me on the worship stage. I played bass with the hymns, and strummed the guitar a little bit. So I was literally brought to faith on this little stage, in this nursery center that they borrowed on Sunday. And came to Jesus through that. Played bass, played guitar, started writing songs at this time in this church. And Dan I think he's like 10 years older than me. He just brought me to faith. So, I see the whole world revolves around the worship stage. I know there's the pulpit and there's the kids ministry and there's prophecy and missions. I appreciate and love, but I came to faith there. So I see the whole world around the worship stage. And
that's really interesting. And what a profound story too. I can just imagine the backdrop of you, your mother. You have sisters too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I can just imagine the backdrop there of you and living in Atlanta, very not cool home situation, your words, being rescued by Christians, and then being initiated into worship. So I see where the formation occurred in you.
Yeah.
Right? That's why you are who you are.
Yeah, right in that space. And then at the same time, my mother's doing an amazing job putting me into scouts and getting me counselors and other men in my life that were speaking into me, those father places that were not just absent, but wounded. In hindsight, I see the great wound there. And just the Lord rescuing me in many ways, bringing me to faith. And, music, the band directors, all the it just was a theme that I was mentored through music. I would start playing for Campus Crusade for Christ or Young Life, and it would be people bringing me alongside to play music, but they were mentoring and shepherding me as I was leading and strumming those songs they were caring for me. So just a really wonderful time. High school, I played French horn and saxophone and started playing jazz guitar because I knew I wanted to study music in college. I was not going to play French horn in that situation. So I wanted to rock, and I was already playing in metal bands and doing all that stuff. This is the mid 90s, kids. So
different day.
Yeah. So marching band, the whole deal. And then went to college, saw Susan, my wife, the first class I saw her. In the back of my mind, the Holy Spirit, which I didn't even know the voice of the Holy Spirit really, but something said, that is going to be your wife.
Okay.
And I thought she was Mormon or Jehovah's Witness.
Okay. Why did you think she was Mormon?
People have vibes. And she's pure. She's sweet. As the day is long, she is just, she embodies that, So I just thought, man, she must be from, another faraway stream. But the Lord told me that. And 6 years later, she finally said yes to a date,
Okay.
Which is a whole story in of itself. It could be a separate podcast on
how you guys got together.
Waiting for the Lord. So yeah, studied jazz guitar in college. And this is cool. I don't tell this often, but I was playing in a black metal band.
Yes.
And we were pretending to be, well, we weren't pretending to be non-Christians, but we were all Christians, but we wanted to play better shows. So we just kind of, we we didn't wear the Christianity stuff on the sleeve. So I'm playing in a black metal band. I'm planning a Vineyard church with my friends. So just started going to a Vineyard church out of high school and playing black metal, playing worship, and playing jazz.
So you have a foot in these three desperate worlds that couldn't be in some ways further apart.
Yeah, but I really liked it. I loved just the diversity of that, and being at a wedding on Saturday morning and then at Sunday night being in a grungy Athens, bar. And then the Vineyard, once I found the Vineyard because I thought it was one of the venues that our metal band was playing in. It was a Friday night, and the Marietta Vineyard, Rick Coffin was a pastor. We walked in on a Friday night and I saw a band playing. This was 1994. So this is, if you know anything about this time, this is the time where the renewal, quote unquote renewal, was happening, where basically what that meant was church was just meeting a lot during the week. And you'd invite your friend to church and they would just start crying when they walked in, and you wouldn't know why. It was it was just a different time, and God was moving in some incredible ways. I walked into one of those services by accident.
You were going to check it out because you thought it was a venue?
Yeah,
what were you doing?
It kind of did some venue stuff.
Yeah.
But there were two venues in Marietta, and we just mixed it up. And the church was being a church that night and not a venue, but you wouldn't know it because you walked in and I saw my friend Wilford. He had dreads. He was playing bass. My friend Chad, who's now a church planner in Florence, Alabama, he was playing guitar. And I just thought, whoa, I thought Holy Spirit music only happened at camp.
Wow.
And I was singing on a Friday night with people with tattoos and broken people just worshiping their guts out. I didn't even understand that or have a grid for it.
Did it touch you in the moment, or were you just kind of weirded out?
Oh yeah, I knew it was the Lord. I mean, I didn't even have that language when I was at the Lord. I knew it was the Lord, but there was something deep in me that was like, okay.
So you just sort of had an emotional, visceral response to that.
Yeah, my worlds are colliding.
Yes.
It wasn't just hymnody, sit and stand, but it was like rock and roll, God, waiting, worship, expectation. It just all came together, and it felt very real to me. So started attending that church, and we planted a church out of Marietta Vineyard a few years later. So
how old were you when you went to plant?
21 years old.
Yeah.
Yep. So Thomas Papevis, the youth guy there, said, "Hey, Mike, will you be our worship pastor for this new adventure?" And I jumped on it. And for 18 years, I led worship in that church.
My goodness.
As the worship pastor under Thomas, with Thomas.
My goodness.
Yeah. So it was awesome. It was incredible experience. So through my 20s and 30s, I led worship in we maybe made it to 250 or 300. I mean, it was a small church, right?
That's right.
But lived the dream. My goodness, made records, wrote songs, did training, learned how to preach and teach and develop leaders. And it was incredible.
But what I hear in your story is that key moments of your own personal formation have had worship, music, and something to do with church sort of in the background.
Yeah.
Literally a moment of rescue with your family.
Yeah.
And then a moment of collision where your college, all of your musical interests in your black metal band, they kind of come colliding into this space that we know as the Vineyard, but it contains inside of it a home for you and then also a vocation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was such a wonderful memory, of God coming together, and such a wonderful memory of the Lord working together and bringing together all those different parts. Yeah, incredible. So, faithfully served in that church years and years. Susan and I got married there. My father committed suicide early on to the church planting, and the pastor's son at 2 years old got leukemia. I mean, like right from the beginning, it just started to fight, right? And we started to write songs in the living room of that church, and to kind of just say, well, we're going to go for this, and we hung on and survived some really dark moments, even in the beginning of that church plant. But it was fantastic. It was great. I learned a lot about how pastors and leadership teams can give the worship leader the tools they need to grow their worship ministries, to really be released into worship ministry and not be under control.
Yeah, a little more permission.
Yeah.
Well, I do have one question though there, Mike, because you just said two things that are pretty big. One, you said, you just start leading worship rather. Your father commits suicide, and your pastor's son at 2 gets leukemia. That's quite a bit of trauma for you personally, but then also for your church.
Yeah.
And you said you were writing songs at the same time. I'm wondering if tragedy or just the real reality of life, did it inform your songwriting?
I wish I could say it did right in the beginning. I don't think we were self-aware, or we didn't have that permission to write pain. Yeah. The church is talking a lot about that now, bring lament into worship. In 1999, the machine was just kind of getting started, right? So there was a lot of triumphalism.
That was the beginning of, in many ways, of the really modern side of the worship industry.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it was before, but it switches gears there in the late 90s.
So I don't think maybe as explicit as it would be now, but I need you, I want you. Those were some phrases that we were singing a lot at the turn of the century. Those were deep.
Yeah, that carried a different kind of weight.
Yeah, and the Vineyard had that language in that time. They kind of owned that intimate language. I mean, not completely, but a lot of the songs were saying, I need you.
That's
I
right.
really need you. And my goodness, for a grieving people, the Vineyards had songs for that for a while, actually.
Connected.
Yeah.
Really connected. Well, man, that's amazing. Mike, thanks for sharing that story. There's a lot in there. Hey, here's what I would like to do, though, if we could maybe switch gears a little bit. I know that you are a trainer in your heart, and it's a part of your vocation to the Vineyard. You are the director of our training arm in Vineyard Worship. I would love it if we could maybe just talk for a few minutes, and you could help us think through worship and worship training, like at the local level. Maybe we could have that discussion, right? Maybe we could start here. And I'll just let you riff, and we can go anywhere we want to with this. Mike, could you just talk to me about, what are the key areas that need addressed at a foundational level in a local worship ministry? What are the things that you look at a worship ministry at just a regular church, Vineyard or otherwise, and you go, these are the kind of things that the worship leader or the pastor needs to be thinking and needs to be putting some heart and intention into?
Yeah, absolutely. I had one version or one answer to this as I was in my 20s and 30s leading at this one church. The past 3 years, I've been teaching and training kind of as an interim, kind of on the road as a coach, a worship team coach. I still have a home church, but a lot of what I've been doing is traveling. So I was in one church for 18 years. I've been in over 100 churches the past 3.5 years. In my mind, things that I thought were true are true. And there's some new things that I'm going, wow, there are some systems in the church. One thing I'm recognizing is we need, I believe, larger on-ramps for creatives versus smaller on-ramps.
All right, what does that mean?
So that means that as the leader of worship or as the pastor, we need to create ways for people to be involved and to be able to contribute to music ministry or sound or media faster. We need to get them in there quicker. A lot of churches have these 3-ring binders with so many rules and regulations, and you got to get through membership 701 before you can play tambourine on the team. And it's like, well, wait a second. There's a divine moment right now for this 7th grader to get up there and play cajon with his dad who's playing drums. Why don't we make space for that? Are we waiting for people to completely rid their lives of sin, or at least public sin, that they can't play, they can't be a part? So bigger on-ramps.
Where are some places you see that people are just missing low-hanging fruit?
Absolutely. So middle and high school.
Yeah,
I mean,
man,
it depends on the culture of your church,
too,
but my goodness, there are some middle and high schoolers that can and should be playing bass. They should be singing. They should be running the media. I mean, the kids that do the Minecraft thing all day long, dude, they can run pro presenter.
That's right.
We've got it. As long as they're introverted and they're not like the talk of the, they're not chatting it up the whole time.
Yeah, they're not FaceTiming while they're keeping up with the overheads.
My goodness, they are bored to tears in the lobby playing Minecraft well, we're doing big boy worship and we can put them to work.
Yeah.
They want to be put to work.
Yeah.
So middle and high school, my goodness, older generations, people that are retired, people that you might just say, well, we really want to have a younger, more vibrant worship thing. Well, come on, there's space and there's place for these older generations to re-engage if they're invited and given some, hey, would you be willing to listen to some new, I'll sign you up for Spotify.
Yeah.
listen to some music.
Yeah, I'll
things
give
that
you
we're
access to
into.
our church account.
Yeah, I think just intentionally building some of those relationships, diverse voices that are not your own. We're so attracted to the people that look and sound like us. Having more conversations with others and creating those on-ramps, I think, is so crucial. Taking some chances. So I use the word test drive. Hey, would you be willing to come test drive and just feel it out? Hey, no pressure. We'll talk after the first day and just let's talk and see how it's going versus, hey, we're making our schedule for the next trimester.
Yeah.
Could I put you in for the third Sunday of every month?
Yeah.
That's just a lot.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is to imagine a worship community that includes younger people, older people, and don't overburden them in terms of making them jump through too many of our church hoops to include them in certain spots.
Yeah, just get them going faster with the test drive language of, hey, we're not. Yeah, there might be some things in your life that might prohibit this, and I would say this, not for the worship leader positions. The worship leader
people
positions,
singing into a microphone,
is a long on ramp.
Yeah.
People singing into a microphone is a long on ramp.
That's been kind of my thing at my church historically. It's like I have more grace to just figure things out with people.
Yeah.
And then people who are singing into a microphone, for whatever reason, to me, that just feels like another level of leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you feel like needs addressed at a foundational level besides inclusion?
Well, I think consistent administration and communication. My goodness. Every Monday or Tuesday, hey team, you're texting your team. I mean, we've got these mega computers in our pockets. Everybody's got one. Hey team, this Sunday, it's coming up, 7 a.m., blah, blah, blah. Bill's going to do his new thing. But the ability to give people a heads up and to communicate consistently. Every Monday in the morning, I text my team. Every Tuesday, the set goes out. Every 3 months, there's a Excel file that they see with everything in content, right? It's just constant, and it's just widgets. It's not Holy Spirit ministry. Mm-hmm. But people feel comforted. Some people don't care. They live minute by minute. But a lot of people, it feels like love to them to get the administration right.
Yeah.
So administrating things well, it being consistent from week to week. This is a 52 times a year proposition that we're in. It's a long journey. So let some of those things be consistent. And then finally, I'd say, on the training level, some key areas is your most faithful volunteers are hogging some of the best seats. So your best bass player that's like, hey man, I got your back. I only got out of town once a year and I'm just going to be here. I'm going to be your bass player. Well, you're not going to develop bass players. None of your guitar players are going to learn how to play bass in a pinch. When this person leaves your church, God forbid, you're going to be in a really, really rough spot. So sometimes our best volunteers, your best sound techs, your best worship leaders, pastors, your a worship leader, if they're up there 51 weeks out of the year, that's a bad plan. And that I'm constantly helping churches work through that.
Yeah, because people just move.
Yeah.
I think the modern reality here, let's just factor out, disagreements in church or bad breakups or people who just move on for whatever reason that isn't wonderful. People just move across the country all the time. I think in general, people are just more transient or whatnot. And then what happens? You're sort of right. Like, what happens if your main worship leader or your one drummer? That's the thing I keep coming back to. Yeah. Like so many churches just have one drummer.
Yeah. Yeah. So you need to have weeks where that piano is empty, but it's up on stage. But
why do you want it on stage?
So people see that it's available, that we have a drum set, but we don't have drummers. Great drummers will see that and they'll say, hey, do you need somebody? Hey, do you need somebody? There are people hiding in your congregation right now that would contribute, but they're assuming that it's already taken care of. And they are not going to say, hey, they're not going to do it. And the best of the best will definitely not. They're fine. If they're already playing out and they're already doing stuff, they're fine with just keeping their mouth shut. Yeah. But if you leave that space open, it will create a vacuum and people will want to fill it. It's so crucial. So, and then your best keyboard player is out in the congregation with their family, and that keyboard is empty, or that drum set is empty, and that drummer is there with his spouse worshiping.
Yeah, that you bring up two issues there that I just kind of want to jump on.
Yeah.
One, if we're using the drummer every single Sunday, or if we have a worship leader who's worshiping every single Sunday, we are divorcing them from being a part of the congregation with their own family.
Yes.
That's a problem.
Yes.
But then also we're just taking up space. So that's what I hear. I do want to maybe ask this question just to drill in on this a little bit. Okay, so let's open it up. Let's make more on-ramps. Let's not let our best people take up all of our space.
Yeah.
But Mike, I can hear it already. Mike, we need Sunday to be quality. Like we need Sunday to be compelling, right? What happens if we give extra drummer or extra bass player or extra keyboard player a chance, and then all of a sudden our Sundays begin to suffer a little bit? What do you do? How do you manage this?
Sure. Well, I would say if you have 1,000 seats in your congregation for a service, it's a different conversation than if you're like the average that has 100 seats. It's a different conversation. The risk is different.
So what you're saying is that some of these principles, they have to be tweaked according to church size and just the natural rhythms of our own community.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. I've been to Passion City Church with 2,000 seats and Chris Tomlin leading. I would be fine if Christian Stanfield's little, 12-year-old kid was playing cajon with, I wouldn't have a problem. I mean, can you play in tempo? Sure.
Sure.
I mean, that would embody something of value, which would be beautiful to me. There's more than just musical excellence to look at.
Yeah.
I'm at a Lutheran church now once a month. I help them lead worship. And they have Mike B., one of our vocalists, has a profound disability physically. But he can sing in pitch. I believe he has muscular dystrophy. He sings in pitch. He's fine. It's great. I love having him on the team. It's a beautiful expression. Musically, if I was just thinking with a musical hat and not a pastoral hat, a lot of people wouldn't cut it. But the church, we need to represent the people that we're serving. And I don't mind making space for people. I don't mind taking some chances. The B team's going to be the A team if you give them some reps.
Amen.
Hey friends, Mike from Vineyard School of Worship. The Band Lab is happening March 5th through 7th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This is an incredible event to train your whole team in about 48 hours. Drums, bass, sound, vocals, piano, guitar, keyboards. We're going to train everybody. It's going to be a 48-hour deep dive in the relational, spiritual, technical components, musicianship, Band Lab. Go to vsow.org. Use the code Ferment15 at checkout for 15% off. We'll see you at Band Lab in Minneapolis in March.
Hey, let me ask you another question, because I know this has to do with training cultures or just developing people over time. I want to talk to you about like feedback. Not feedback in a microphone, but feedback with your team. Can you just talk to us about giving and receiving feedback with people that you're raising up? How can you establish a culture of feedback? Because I know for me, it's really hard to grow without getting some outside observation.
Yeah. So if you're a worship leader and you're developing people around you, one of the most important things you're going to do is on Sunday night, Sunday afternoon, Monday morning, you're going to text that person. You're going to email them. You're going to do, hey, how did you feel about yesterday? Right? That's the humble inquiry. There's a book called Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein. Schein, humble inquiry, such a brilliant idea of instead of saying, hey, yesterday was kind of rough. What's the deal? Right? Well, that's not a great way to approach it. How did you feel about yesterday?
Yeah, just that question there, the way it's framed, one has a way of opening people up. The other has a way of shutting people down.
Yeah. And I might even front load that with an encouragement. Hey, the saxophone thing was great yesterday. Yeah. How did you feel about the rest of the service? Yes. Right? So, or man, your voice was on point. I love the song selection. How did it go with the drummer? In my brain, I know it was a nightmare with the drummer. Uh-huh. In my brain, I already know.
Or maybe it's great.
Yeah, or it's great.
Yeah.
But in the case that it was bad, I've already gotten texts from his mom that said, the worship leader was a jerk or whatever. Yeah. So I already know some things, but I'm not going to approach and go to the feedback and start giving my refinement right away, but I'm going to pull out of them. And here's what happens is when you ask the people that you're training, what do you think? What are you feeling? 9 times out of 10, they're already going to self-confess the weakness.
Yeah.
And identify it. And then you can say, that's really good that you see that. Because I noticed that too. We had 6 songs and they were all songs about you and there were no God songs. You're probably right. Yeah, did you notice how the congregation worshiped differently? It's such a better way of training versus just coming at it so hard and as a, alpha,
Sure.
leader. It's just harder to be trained under that.
And I'm wondering, Mike, do you try to establish with people who are coming on to the team, do you try to establish any sort of conversation with them that lets them know, hey, we have a culture of feedback. We value that. Do you let people know up front, hey, whenever we play, I might get a text to you occasionally. I don't know how you do this.
Well, it never stops. I mean, if they see the anointed, gifted preacher getting feedback and they know that he or she has feedback loops that are important, then it runs across the whole organization. So the most anointed, most gifted are still getting tweaked. That's a sign of health. So everybody, even me, if I'm coming in as the worship boss, they know that I've got things that I'm working on, and I'm self-confessing those things. Mm-hmm. Even as I'm leading, I'm recognizing my own weakness. And here's the thing, I give them an opportunity to speak into me. Hey, is there any way I could lead you better? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that I'm missing?
Those are brave questions.
Dude, they're so brave, but so important.
Yeah.
If we can ask them humbly, people, once they trust, they'll be able to come to you and say, Mike, the way that you start rehearsal is always so, production oriented. Could we have a moment to look at each other in the eye? This is something an elder told me 12 years ago that changed my life. He said, Mike, you're such a boss, which I love, but I don't feel loved, right? Could we have just a moment to breathe and see each other? And that transformed the way I led. So
what do you do? Let's just dive into that for a second. What do you do at the beginning of rehearsal now?
At the beginning of every rehearsal, I make sure we get all our ears, everybody's tuned, everybody's got everything dialed in and they're comfortable. And then I say, hey guys, sorry, I know you're comfortable, but do you mind huddling up here? Yeah. And we might only have an hour left, right? This is going to eat into the time, but this is so crucial. I call it the 7-minute check-in. Hey, we huddle up. Hey guys, thank you for being here. I value you. You are incredible. Hey, no, come over here. Look. Stay in the circle. Hey, get a little close. I'm having to manage because people do not like that kind of. They're there to rock, right?
Yeah. Or they're not used to this.
Yeah, they're not used to just saying, "Hey, you matter. I appreciate you." And if there's a little more time, I might say, "Hey, everybody, is there anybody just really struggling right now? Anybody in a really low spot?" People chime in. My goodness. divorce, cancer, right? There's things that are going on that we don't know about. One time, one of the young kids, he confessed to sleeping with his girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And we were able to say, oh man, we prayed for him. We didn't judge him. We didn't kick him out.
No, and he still played that morning,
yeah,
but,
and then,
but you...
Yeah, in the green room, there's more relationship happening, and there's a safety there to say, oh, even one time a sound guy said, I don't believe in God anymore. Like, I'm losing my faith. Like, in that huddle, we're about to rock, whatever jams, and people are just saying, this is who I really am. So if you can create a safe space for that before you sing these God songs, that is the story of the world.
Yeah.
And a God that comes into all those fragile moments before you rock. If you can do that, you'll win the day.
Yeah, and I like the idea of a culture of feedback, or a culture of transparency, honesty, conversation, all that. I like the idea that it can trickle down and even to these pastoral moments, like a 7-minute check-in, which actually is inviting for people to just be honest about their actual life.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, things that should be in the open do come in the open, right?
Yeah. So if you don't have a feedback culture, one great practical thing to do, Matt Farron has got some incredible things. He's up in Fort Collins.
Shout out to Matt.
Matt's awesome. One simple thing is create a Google Doc that you send to your worship leader. Hey, Rebecca, Sunday, what was the high for you and what was the low for you? What was the greatest moment? What was the hardest moment? And then from that answer, you can have an incredible discussion about Sunday without, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did the people engage with you? I don't know. It felt great to me. Well, I thought it was a disaster, So what was the high? What was the low for you as a leader? And then you can develop that person and give more feedback.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I only want to drill in here one more direction. On the one hand, I'm like, yes, we definitely need to have cultures of feedback, or really just cultures of transparency, right? But how do we do this in a way that doesn't lead to cultures of perfection? Yeah, because it could easily become the sort of thing where, a moment ago you're saying everyone's going to get feedback, even me or even the anointed leader. Yeah. Everybody's going to get feedback, and we always need it. We always want it. Yeah. What can we do to keep it from just being perfection as an idol? Yeah. Because goodness gracious, that can be really inhibiting. It could really feel like there's no freedom, there's no risk taking now. We're settling towards a common denominator of what's safe. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think that in all feedback, a majority of it should be just encouragement, right? So one of my favorite classes to do when I train is a worship leader masterclass, where somebody gets up and they pretend that we're in church and they lead us for a song. And then they stop, we clap, we say, thank you for leading us. And then I just say, hey guys, let them have it. Everything you loved about what this person did and who they are. And it's awesome. I mean, there are tears. It is cathartic moment for a worship leader to hear that positive, genuine feedback. So we need that. We need a majority of it to be, hey, Sunday was Sunday was great. This specific thing you did was fantastic. That's so right. Andy Stanley idea would be, what is rewarded is repeated. What is rewarded is repeated. If your sound tech needs training on a million different things, but they show up on time, hey, Jim, I love that you show up on time. Yeah. Thank you so much. The batteries are already in the packs, man. We're ready to roll.
Yeah, you do. Man, in my head, I'm thinking you need to learn EQ 101. We need so many things, but my goodness, you are so faithful, right? So the very thing that they're great at and they do naturally, we want to reward that, bless that, give feedback on the positive stuff. Most weeks. And then the big things, like the big, hey, this thing you're doing is a systemic problem, or it's a big deal. Those big, massive things, maybe once, twice, 3 times a year, you get those big moments of refinement, but not every week. Every week can't be a boulder of critique.
Well, what I like in what you're saying right now is that the feedback isn't just negative critique. It's positive, and maybe even mostly positive. So a culture of feedback is not a culture of correction. It's a culture of mirroring, and hopefully mostly mirroring what people are good at. Yeah. I know in my own life, it's so interesting. And I know this is true for me, and I've seen it 100 times in other people. We are really not aware at what we're good at oftentimes, or what we're great at.
Yeah.
And so it's oftentimes very helpful to have other people tell you, Mike, you really blessed me in this area. You just who you are, you carry it, and you can lean into it.
Yeah. But in our non-denominational, maybe even Vineyard Church world, the problem isn't too little positive. The problem is usually too little critical feedback, okay, is mostly the problem. Hey, how was it? It was great. It was great. Everything was awesome. High fives, high fives. Positive, 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 right? That's kind of the world a lot of smaller churches live in because we're afraid to have that fierce conversation, right? So for instance, my friend Wilford, he learned to play the pedal steel. And we all loved it. We all listened to that kind of country stuff in the mid 2000s. And he played it. And dude, we had pedal steel at church every Sunday for like 2 years. I loved it. He loved it. My little clique of people, right, in the church, nobody came to us. It took 2.5 years for somebody to finally say, what is that country twang thing we have every Sunday?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So just in a larger church or church with lots of systems, that probably would have been handled already, and it would have already been put in an appropriate place. But just an example of like a place where just a little critical feedback can
really, really help. All right. Here's another question, maybe coming off of that. What do you do if you have a really faithful and kind person, maybe a faithful and kind worship leader, or even a band person, but they just don't grow? Like you have a culture of feedback, you have a culture of support. It's not overly critical. There's no perfection idols. You're not beating people up. You're reflecting good stuff. And they need to grow, but they just don't. Maybe they even want to grow.
Sure.
Like they're telling you, I want to grow.
Yeah.
And you said, well, let's work on this. And they work, but they just don't. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to be patient. We need to tread carefully, especially if they're faithful. If they're checking all the other boxes that we've set up, we really need to go slow, especially with any sort of removal or fast-paced thing. We need to pastor people and shepherd people and give people a lot of chances, right? To, hey, in this area, we've talked about it a lot. What's going on? Do you sense growth? Once again, those humble inquiries, checking in with them. Oftentimes, there's other issues in their family or their life, or there's a sin issue on the side that's just kind of not been addressed. Hardly ever is it the issue. You keep bringing that weird guitar pedal, bro, and playing it on every song. What is going on? Well, it's an authority thing. You represent the man. You finally get to it. You're like, oh, okay, it's this issue. So oftentimes it's not the issue, the musical or otherwise. There's other things at play. A lot of times with singers, it's things with shame that is encroaching in on their abilities or lack of abilities to deliver, for lack of a better word, that we just need to pastor people through and shepherd them and ask good questions, and have some tools at your disposal to help them to walk through. Some might call it hoops to jump through, but, hey, I'd like you to meet with this person to do some lessons, right? So I've had musicians, I've said, hey, bass player, I'm going to pay for you to go see this guy. Will you do 4 lessons? Yeah, I'll do 4 lessons.
I love that idea.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to pay for it. I love you. I think you're doing great, but I take lessons and I'm a professional, quote unquote. I'm still taking lessons. So would you take lessons? So that's a hoop I'm going to put in front of them to jump through, and they got to jump through it.
Yeah, but it's pretty low. I mean, especially if we're paying for it. But I love that idea.
Yeah.
Especially with some of our band people. Hey, what if we just get a pro lesson for you?
Yep.
For a time or two and just see what happens? Might spark some energy and some encouragement in their life.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a lateral move that needs to happen. So your old school electric guitar player with like the headless Steinberger and the carbon amp,
that's right,
and the gear that he refuses to upgrade. Hey, maybe they need to play bass. Hey, would you think about playing bass with the youth band or what? You just try to think of creative ways that maybe are a better fit for people, and they're going to grow and excel in that lateral move. whether it's sound, sometimes people end up being like the pastor of the team. Hey, you're great relationally. Let's do our party at your house. And you kind of become the mama, the mama
host.
bear of the team. It's a better fit for you versus singing 3 out of 4 weeks.
That's right. That's right. I love that though. That's pastoral insight. Hey, this is another question that maybe is a little bit more specific to the realities of worship leading. What kind of pastoring or mentoring do people who regularly lead from a platform really need? And I guess, Mike, what I'm trying to get at here is I'm thinking about the human tendency to lose touch with reality because of the visibility and power that are inherent with platforms. You and I, we've talked about this before. You stand on a platform every week, a couple hundred people, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 people look, they're all facing you. There's lights on you. Your voice is being amplified out of a microphone.
Yeah.
I think we sort of lose touch with the metaphysical or even spiritual power.
My goodness,
of what's happening in that moment.
Yeah.
Just having our voice amplified to a room of 1,200 people.
Yeah, it's crazy. I tell it's a little different conversation, but worship songwriting, like writing songs for your local church, like what artist would kill for 50 people at the coffee shop every Sunday looking at them, right? I mean, that would be a gift like no other. So just practically, not even a spiritual thing, but practically, you've got 73 people standing and looking at you every week. That's a big deal. Like that
we haven't really thought about those implications, have we?
My goodness, it is a gift. We've downplayed, this is not a performance. This is all about God. This is not about you. We've downplayed the human part of what is actually happening, which quote unquote secular musicians, they get it. That's part of the buzz. It's part of the vibe. And God created us this way. It's okay to feel good about that. I mean, it's a fantastic feeling to be there. So yes, we need to be constantly shepherding and mentoring those that are in positions of power. This is a power position.
What do you feel like is the right kind of shepherding and mentoring? Because I don't think it's just beating people down.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, pastors, if you're not looking your worship leaders, those that are choosing the songs and saying, welcome to blah, 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 Baptist, if you're not checking in with that person constantly, weekly, bi-week, I mean, there's meals, there's exchange. That's number one. I mean, we've got to be together. We've got to be connecting with each other, eyeball to eyeball, with fellowship, with confession, with questions like, hey, what are you learning? Worship bro that's on the stage tearing it up every week to 250 people that are like, oh, the overwhelming, dude, they love that song. They love my voice. I'm a great leader. I'm actually pretty good at this. You should use loops we're all experts, right?
Yes.
You can feel like an expert if 70 people are shaking their head up and down every week and there's not a lot of tension, right? It can really fill us with a lot of pride. So as leaders, we need to be checking in with those we've given that place of authority. What are you learning? Where is your weakness? Hey, we have had a lot of great weeks, but who are you training up? Who are you giving this away to? Are you giving this away? Oh, I don't want to give it away. This is what I'm called to do. Okay, but we're called to make disciples. Are you making disciples? Well, no, that's the discipleship pastor's job. Well, no, how about if we got 100 people, we got 10 singers in the church. We got 2 trombone players. We've got a flautist, just statistically 2 plumbers,
it's all here.
It's all here. Who are you developing? Are you the bee's knees, or are there other people that are, this is hard if they're better than you? What if there's somebody that's musically better than you, more anointed than you?
Oh man,
that can move the room.
Dude, I love this conversation. So part of my own story is, at my church, I was the worship leader, like official worship leader for almost 9 years. And then, especially towards years 6.5, 7, 8, I was, goodness gracious, suddenly surrounded by unbelievable talent.
Yeah.
And I remember when I became aware of the fact that pretty much every one of my worship leaders is better than me now. All the guitar players can play better than me, and the singers sing better than me. But then even beyond that mysterious charismatic word, anointed, they're more anointed than me.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the clearest words I ever have had in ministry is when Ray Hollenbach asked me to be senior pastor, and I took over the senior pastor thing, and I was like, okay, well, we'll have to have a worship leader. And I heard the Lord just tell me, your worship leader is Hannah. And I heard the Lord just say it so clear, and it's because she's anointed. I just felt that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I became very, very aware of, there's this girl at my church, Hannah Doherty Despain, and she's way more anointed than me.
Yeah.
You know? And at first that was like, whoa, kind of a threat. And no one else probably knew this or whatever. It was just sort of internal. But then I start to realize this is a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah.
What a gift. And she's been such a blessing. And, you know, shout out to Hannah.
Yeah. And your quote unquote anointing rests in communication or in
something else. Yeah.
Relational things where, you know, maybe Hannah won't have that piece. So as a worship pastor in any context, who said this recently? Everybody doesn't get everything.
That's it. Everybody has something. Not everybody has everything.
Yeah. So even the worship boss of the ministry, there are other people that are going to be better at the relationship, better at the production, better at things, and you want to give that away.
That's right.
Give authority away. Another thing I'll say about mentoring those is if you do it well, those that you're mentoring won't even know it. You're just going to do things that are not going to feel so official. Hey, can we get together tomorrow for coffee at 10? You know,
Mike, come on, preach, baby. Love this.
So it's a relational thing. You know, you might have somebody over and for 2 hours, you're not getting to anything. The whole night might go by and you might just hear the Lord say, you know, not tonight. Nope, don't go for it. Just build relationship. Just hang out. What are they into? What are they leaning into? Lean into that and get to know them. You go to them. You go to them. You go to their house, this will cost you, by the way. You go to their place of work and get lunch and walk around their crazy office that they've been referencing for 2 years. To me, I think, are these the tricks I'm using to manipulate this person? Well, no.
Not at all.
It's just...
This is good pastoring.
I want to befriend this person. I want the church to grow. Sure. I want good things to happen in growth. But these are a little different than just being a friend. You're kind of leading them, you're shepherding them. So you going to them is so good. And if you do it well, they won't even know it. They'll just be little things that you're doing, little texts that you send them. Hey, check out this article, or hey, this reminded me of you, or I think you do this really well.
Yeah.
You do it better than this expert even does.
That's right.
Like, just genuine, not disingenuous things, but just genuine connection to where they don't even know they're being mentored.
That's a real word. That's a real word. The other thing I'll just say to tack onto that, Mike, is I know that the times that pastoring, and I'm using air quotes here, pastoring has been successful in my own ministry, it's always been when there's been a bridge of friendship, right? So if there ever comes a moment where we do need to have a correction, or if there is a moment where we need to have I'll just say a more authentic conversation about reality, whether it's Sunday morning or what's happening in a leader's life, if there is a bridge of friendship, we can get across it. Yeah. And when there's not, and it just becomes letter of the law, you know, like this is our manual, this is the contract or whatever. It's over. It's over. Yep. Yeah. So great word. I love that. I love that idea of they won't know it. Yeah. Okay. Hey, let me talk to you about this, Mike. We've sort of hinted at this, but I just want to come back to this because I think it's so big. Can you talk to us about some people who are overlooked in our worship ministry?
Sure.
People who are either we're overlooking them in terms of adding them to our worship ministry, or people who are serving right now, but we're not seeing them, we're not acknowledging them, we're not training them, we're not thanking them, just people who are overlooked.
I think most of the time we have discussions about, I looked out and no one's worshiping, or there's not the response I was hoping, or it doesn't look like the curated YouTube video
that's right.
that I saw. You know, when's the last time you sent an email or a text to all the people that demonstratively, they physically worship in your congregation?
Oh, that's a great idea.
And you said, hey, thanks for modeling worship.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for showing up on time. You are on time every week. You're one of the 6 people that are there. Well, I've got the massive 19-piece Easter band, and there's 6 freaking people in the room. Thank you, 6 people. You are such a gift to me as
You're
a
talking about
worship
the
leader.
congregation
The
here.
congregation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're texting and emailing just the regular congregation saying,
Love
hey,
this.
you respond. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for modeling worship.
Amen.
It means so much to me. Other people that are left out of the equation is the media team person. They're preparing the slides, right? Oftentimes we just do not communicate with them. We don't look them in the eye and say, hey, thank you. Hey, I'm busy. I'm kind of, hey, I really appreciate you. No,
That's
look,
right.
hey, thank you so much.
That's right.
Oh, I'm just here to serve, Pastor. Hey, I know that, but you are awesome. You do that, right? Little tears, whatever, right? It's a miracle that I even think like this because this is not my natural inclination. I want to go, hey, that one time you were a 0.75 off. I want to address that. But to be able to, hey, sound guy, just to go back there and sit next to him or her during the sermon and be like, dude, worship was so good today. I love the way you diffused that situation. Hey, show me this thing on this EQ, blah, blah, blah.
That's right.
Just sitting back at the front of the house every once in a while. Oh my gosh, you could really, those people,
It's another world.
It's another world. So encouraging them just very practically, if you're leading worship, I've played bass a lot as a worship leader for teams, for other worship leaders. Worship leaders hardly ever look back and talk to the bass player, right? Everybody
Only
else,
if they hit a wrong note, right?
dude, everybody else can kind of, there's ebb and flow. There's a lot of patting and forgiveness, but your bass player really needs to play the right notes and know. So rehearsal is for the bass player to make sure they're comfortable and there's a light on their stand and they can see the crazy chord chart you printed up that you already know by heart, but they are just learning. So communicate with your bass player during rehearsal. Hey, walk back to them and say, oh, is everything cool? You need anything? Yeah, we're going to go here. You just have this little conversation with them, which is great because they're oftentimes just left out of the conversation or left out of that. So yeah, front of house, media team volunteers. I've already said it. We're overlooking youth and middle school. That kid that in your brain, they're in 5th grade and they're immature. They just got their license, right? And they're probably going to be,
They'll be gone in 2 years.
Yeah, right? So,
But you know what? They have a ton of time and they could be with you every Sunday for 2 years if you need them.
they'd meet you for 4 hours. You'll be their summer project, and they'll give you 50 hours and reorganize the Christmas decor around the, backstage.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds like I'm being manipulative or something, but it's just the heart of ministry. Like they're either going to be doing it somewhere else or they're going to be growing here. So I want to grab their attentions. Others that we kind of leave out in the songwriting circles, we leave out the theologians, we leave out the poets. And I think we need to invite them into our songwriting circles to some degree. They can really be helpful. Those that are really students of the Bible. Once again, people over 50, people, non-majority voices that are not your own, people that don't look like you, don't talk like you. It's so difficult to have those conversations, but to invite them into it and say, hey, I'm not really great even with approaching this topic, but I want to ask you about you're from the Bahamas, right? You're from the Caribbean. Will you just tell me what that's like and what your experience is like in this church? And hey, I heard you're a musician. How do I make space for you? Will you help me? Just reaching out to other voices. One year, our worship for years and years was a dude fest. And I just had a harder time connecting with women. And I prayed about it and we reached out, and the Lord just told me, I want you to keep inviting women to sing, to play. And I just made an effort over a couple of years to just ask and ask. So the Lord might give you a certain population or people, and a lot of times it will be people you're not comfortable with to reach out to that are overlooked. And they're waiting for somebody to see them.
I think I just want to underline two things that you said because I thought it was so good. One would be emailing or texting the worshipers in your congregation.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Thank you for worshiping.
We call at our church, we call them lightning rods. Because if like those 6 people come, the worship is automatically, no matter what the set is, no matter how we play, no matter if it's good or bad, no matter if we sing wrong words or anything, if those 6 people are in the room, the whole congregation it's like they're giving grace to other people.
Absolutely.
Boy, they need to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
And I'm just with you on the media team thing as well. I know that for years, I only talked to my media person or even my sound person. I only talked to them in terms of just the nuts and bolts of practical things that make worship happen for Sunday. It was just, hey, can you do this for me? And I'm going to do this here. But it was never thank you.
Yeah.
And I was really bummed out with myself when I realized, I have a great faithful team that sits at the back, but I just have never thanked them. And I've tried to amend that.
Yeah, public thanks. Some of them won't like it, but do it anyway. Hey, everybody look back there. That's blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Private, a thank you note, a text, a personal connection, or just looking them in the eye is so huge. And the last overlooked person I just want to say is background singers, those who are not singing the lead anytime during the service. My goodness, those are people that we need to give value to and let them know what they do matters, even if they're not singing a lead part. So what I love to do at some point during a rehearsal is take all the vocalists off the mics, get them in a little circle in front of the band during rehearsal, take our in-ears out, and we just sing together. We look at each other, and I say, that harmony's great, that harmony's great. Hey, you're singing the octave up. You're singing it up an octave, singing the melody. That still matters. Thank you. That's supporting what we're doing, right? Dude, singers, background singers, they have a mind game that's going on with them. Does this matter? Can they hear me? We need to let them know that their position is valuable, not just what's coming out of their mouths vocally, but their presence, right? The way they look, they're embodying worship for the other 70 people in the room. Are they
visible worshipers?
Yeah.
Like BGVs who hold their hands up in worship or hold their hands out or just like in some way are transforming their body to the atmosphere of worship.
Absolutely.
It's so helpful.
Yeah. And the phrase that's going around a lot now, are you a non-anxious presence?
That's right.
Are you freaking out about the harmony or your ears or the fact that you didn't get the lead? Or are you just there? You're present people. You're opening your eyes every once in a while, smiling. You're with people. You're living the dream. You're singing. You're in a band. I mean, dude, this is awesome.
That's right. Well, I just want to throw one more thing here, and it's really not about what we're talking about at all.
Yeah.
But it's something that I love, especially if we're talking about background singers for a moment. And you don't see it very much, or at least in our circle. I think in other traditions you do. I love a male harmony with a female lead.
Yeah.
And we just don't hear that much,
All day.
So shout out to all the male harmony singers out there. I think that we need that. Like more females on the melody, males on the harmony. That's really, really beautiful.
Yeah, and let me speak something to male worship leaders specifically. If a female is going to take the lead of a song, maybe towards the end of the set, what is wrong with you surrendering your instrument and just singing with them, right? Sure, you can embody both with and without an instrument, but just that freedom of not needing the utility of the instrument. We don't need all 6 acoustic guitars playing that that pattern. Just mixing it up, not being, if you're a background singer, do you always hold the mic Pentecostal style, or do you put it in the stand, or do you do both? Are you not connected to, is it not your identity to do one or the other? Non-anxious presence. There is no tension in my face and my body and my spirit. I'm here to worship and just model. Everybody's staring at you. No, it's not a performance, but it is a performance. There's a bit of theatrical things that are happening. You're up on a stage. It's lit up. People are looking to you for cues. And more than just vocally, they're just watching, and that's okay. You're made in the image of God. It's okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of permission being given from that spot. Yeah, it's good. All right, hey, I want to ask you 3 more questions, and they're fairly divergent from the things we've been talking about up to this point, okay? And these are maybe just things I've been noticing from your own ministry, so I'd love to just pick your brain for a minute. Mike, I've heard you talk about the 3 streams of worship. and I think this is like using your language here just a little bit, but I've heard you talk about the charismatic stream, maybe the Bible or the evangelical stream, and then the liturgical stream. And I know from being in worship moments that you have put together or curated, I know that you look to mix the practices of each in your worship setting. Yeah. Can you just talk to me about that? Why you do that? Yeah. And then what do the streams have to offer? And how are some ways that maybe us charismatic folks could lean into the liturgical, or if we're a bit more high church liturgical, how can we offer some charismatic waiting and expectation? Like, just, I don't know. Just talk to that for a second.
Let me just say this. At age 36, 37, I recognized that, okay, I don't sense a call to plant a church. And in our particular family of churches, church planting is a really big deal. And a lot of worship leaders are called to plant churches, but I never felt the call to plant a church. I always felt God say, teach and mentor, pray, as I want you to lead my people in worship, not necessarily from the pulpit. And that might change in the future, but so that desire to know, how is this more than just 5 songs and a sermon? How is worship more than just me putting together a few songs that other people wrote and singing them before this person talks? Worship's got to be more than that, right? So I started to explore a master's degree in worship. So I went to the Robert Weber Institute of Worship. It's a 2-year program, and I got a master's degree, and I learned so much. And I wouldn't even call myself a theologian or a scholar by any means, but it helped give me a better foundation and understanding about what I'm about to talk about, which is a greater understanding of the whole church, and that my thing is just one small little sliver of a sliver. Even the most amazing Hillsong, Bethel, modern worship expression is still just a sliver of a sliver.
And it's new. And it's recent.
New. Yeah, I mean, historically, this is like...
Yeah, our Vineyard tradition it's recent.
Yeah. So
the emphasis on singing and I mean, the church has always sung, but in terms of like a band singing, that's like...
Dude, it's
45 years old.
So much to learn. Let me just say, just approach humbly, even if you're not called to do an advanced degree. Some of you are. Some of you, I hope, go deeper in this thing, and you hang on and you learn as much as you can. So I went into this Robert Weber experience, and the first chapel services, you look over down the pew, and there's men and women from all over the world, India, Africa. There's dudes with collars on, Catholic collars that you
high
call
church,
covered in tattoos, and they're, it's just everybody's worshiping. And there's different things happening. There's psalm singing where they're just chanting psalms, and then the congregation chants another part of the song. There's these prayers that are, just full of depth, and it's worship, but it's not singing, right? So there's so much more than what we see, especially if we've only been in 1 or 2 streams of the church. So this idea of 3 streams is the Anglicans kind of like to say that they embody the 3 streams, which is, an evangelical or attractional, charismatic, Pentecostal, or experiential is what you'd call it. And then this third part of the triangle, if you can see it as a triangle, is liturgical, historical, or formational. So these are the 3 kind of streams. And my hope is that we would say they all have value. Right? In the Vineyard, we've always lived in the radical middle of the evangelical stream, Bible-based, the pulpit's at the center of the stage, the Word of God, right?
Yes.
Which is great. It's fantastic. And then you have the charismatic, swinging from the chandeliers, experience music, feel it. Did you feel it? Did you feel worship? We've tried to live in the tension of those 2 things, which is fantastic. But what for me got left out over the years was this liturgical, historical thing, which in the formation of the Vineyard, we were running from that. It had run its course. It meant nothing. It was this habitual thing that just was not.
Well, I think in our Vineyard history, a lot of the people who originally planted Vineyard churches, they were either complete unbelievers, or a lot of them were sort of maybe nominal Catholics, or people who were, and I'm using this term generously here, they were escaping the mainline high church expression, and they found freedom in the Vineyard, right? And so they left some things behind.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean that as a critique.
Yeah.
I just mean like this is kind of what happened in our own story.
Yeah.
But some things got left behind.
Yeah. And I experienced that too. Like when I came into the Vineyard, it became much simpler and it was freeing in a large way. I didn't connect with God in communion. I never really understood it, right? So to experience God in singing and worship, what we call worship, which is just the singing part, was so incredible and so good. But what I learned going into Weber and some of these other experiences is that there's some depth there, historical depth that means something. It counts for something. And my story is not the story of the boomers who were escaping some of that habitual stuff. Some of that habitual stuff I actually need now. And I desire and I want it. For instance, reading scripture every week from a common place or a common book. So every week for the past 5 years, I've pulled the psalm from the common book of prayer. So the psalm that the Anglicans read is the same psalm that I read in worship. I just added, it gives a sense of depth and weight. And I'm borrowing from that stream, right, of the liturgical stream, and it's strengthening my 5 rock songs, right?
Well, and I also like the idea that if you are pulling the reading from the lectionary that week, specifically the psalm, I just love the idea that you're doing 2 things there. Well, 3.
Yeah.
A, you're tapping into something historic.
Yep.
B, you're tapping into something that's happening all over the world that Sunday morning with Christians.
Yep.
So many Christians are reading that psalm together.
Yeah.
And then 3, we're just connecting the idea of scripture to worship.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if I start the service with, this is amazing grace, this is unfailing love, end of song, cymbals, everybody clap. Oh, good morning. We're so glad to have you here today. Hey, as we continue worship, let's look to Psalm 13,
Yes.
and we just read the psalm.
Yeah.
And then psalm,
do you just read it over the people, or do you have people read it with you?
I read it over the people.
Okay.
So I usually don't even put it on the screen because I want people to close their eyes or stay in
that moment.
pace of worship. And then it's being read over them. And if there's a male and a female on the team, we split it up.
Okay.
So it's like male voice, female voice, male voice, female voice. And, it's instructed to read it with a little bit of oomph, don't read it for the first time. So on my phone, I've just got apps that are the daily office. So if it's midweek service, I've got the text for that day. Sunday, am I Catholic? Am I getting Catholic? Is the church going? No, I'm just pulling the word of God into these modern worship songs, and it adds depth and weight and history to it. So it's good. Another way we think of the streams is, as we do want our service to be attractional. We don't want to create needless obstacles for people to enter into worship, or you have to be in the club to figure this out. But we present the communion or the Eucharist in an attractional way. We have a language that gives space and clarifies what the heck we're doing. What is this weird thing? If people haven't been to church, they're like, what do we sing? What are we doing? Who's he? Who's the lamb?
Who is he?
What's all this blood language?
That's hilarious.
And now we've got blood represented in this grape juice. What are we doing?
Yeah, of course. We become anesthetized to the metaphors we use.
My goodness.
It's easy to do after a while.
Yeah.
But for new people, it's shocking and it's fairly disorienting.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mike Pilavachi this summer at a conference we were at, the Spirit was moving greatly at the end of the service. People were getting healed. There were loud, people were laughing, or just different things were happening in the room. And Mike said, hey, if you're not feeling anything right now, it's okay. I'm not feeling anything. And he was leading it.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
He was, and it just, that tension of charisma that we all need to be feeling something. And no, there's some true things that are happening. God's not touching everybody at that level. There's some things happening. So there's that tension there. And as worship leaders, we're doing that same thing through our song choices. So my song choices are not all experiential. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. That is a deeply emotive song that is us telling God who we are, which is fantastic. What else? Am I saying things about God, who God is? Mm-hmm. Is he Father? Is he Son? Is he the Spirit? What are those attributes? Is that in my songs?
Yeah. Well, what I hear you saying is is in these three streams and the way that you've allowed them to touch your own worship practice. It's kind of like that metaphor you used at the beginning of our conversation of making on-ramps.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about making on-ramps for people into your worship ministry, but I hear you making on-ramps for the people in our congregation.
Absolutely.
Different kinds of people too. I know a few years ago, this is probably 3 years ago, Mike, we started making call and response prayer, like scripted, non-spontaneous call and response prayer, part of our service. And we do it every single Sunday.
Yeah.
And it was very instructive. 6 months after we did that, a guy who had been to my church forever, you know, came to me and told me, he said, Adam, that moment, that minute and a half, that minute, whatever that is, he said, that's my favorite part of worship.
Yeah.
You know?
That's great.
He says, I love the music. It's great. But it doesn't really connect with me. He goes, I love to hear our spoken voices together declare something, or to pray something, or to confess something together. And it was really moving to him. And what's interesting is, if I were to typecast him as a person, not in a negative way, but just, you know how there's different kinds of people. He's a specific type of person.
Yeah.
If you wanted to use the word intellectual, fine, use the word intellectual. He's a bookish, intellectual type person, and that worship moment resonated with him. And I realized, oh my goodness, for years, maybe we were making room for certain kinds of people, but then we weren't making space for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody's approaching at a different level. And the people in the staff meeting need to understand that the congregants are introvert, extroverts. They're every Enneagram number. Some people grew up Catholic and they don't want to do communion every week. And some people, it's refreshing and good to them.
Yeah, some people grew up from like super Pentecostal streams and never did communion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like never.
So what are some, every week I love, of the three streams, can I be, evangelical has a lot of weight to it as a word now. So, just the word attractional, seeker sensitive. Can I be seeker sensitive? Maybe my first few sentences are very seeker sensitive. Hey, good morning. We're going to sing some music and we welcome you to sing with us. This is a safe place for you. Please join us as we sing.
Yeah.
Right? So that's attractional. And then we're going to move into, song 3. We're going to move into a time of, we're going to invite you to communion, to this intimate place with Jesus. He's invited us to. We're going to sing of the Spirit, the Father. I might pray in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We, at my church, at our vineyard in VCC in Marietta, we have been saying the Lord's Prayer before. It's this little anchor now.
Our Father.
Yeah, our Father.
Our
just
Father.
Putting that right there. Hey, let's say this thing every week together. This is going to be a little anchor point for us, which is historic and very biblical.
And it's what Jesus said to pray, right?
Yeah,
Right,
and then the last song might be Reckless Love, right? So, which is experiential, and we might, sing the verse more than once, or mix. We might not play the arrangement or have a moment of prophecy or whatever. So, I don't think every church has to be like this or have these values, but for me as a worship leader, this has added a lot of depth and a lot of freedom to see the other streams. Lord, forgive me for my judgments of these other streams of Catholics, right? My goodness, dude, would we be here without the Catholics?
We wouldn't. And even in our own Vineyard story, one of the things I think that is, coming back to the forefront of our Vineyard story is that John Wimber loved the whole church.
Absolutely.
Like he loved the Anglicans and the Anglicans loved him.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just a huge connection there. So yeah, I love this idea of coming past our historic judgments and seeing the fruit that these movements have. All right, hey, let me talk to you out of this question. Let me talk to you about the Eucharist, communion for a minute. Mike, it's kind of funny to me how in the vineyard or in our little vineyard world, worship, if we talk about worship, people's brains are always going straight to music. But historically, it's always the Eucharist, the center of worship maybe, in a vineyard service is the song portion, but around the world and then through history, it's always been Eucharist. I'd love to hear you talk to me about maybe this. What can charismatic or music-centric movements like us do to connect with the body and the blood of Jesus?
Yeah. Well, I think that word can be an obstacle for many. Eucharist, we can soften it by saying communion or the Lord's table, right?
Yeah.
But just even in the language, right? As you mess with or you begin to think of these liturgical streams or the historic streams, be careful with your language, right? Because you start. I'm not rebuking you.
Yeah, you're
for
rebuking
using,
me right now. I'm getting rebuked.
for
everyone.
using that, but to us, we get it. It doesn't feel like a heavy word.
That's right.
Because we've just been thinking about it and talking about it for a lot. But for a lot of people, that it's just it does have some depth and weight to it. So thinking about our language and how we can invite people into this beautiful historic thing that Jesus himself invited us to. I mean, I don't know if Jesus wants us to do one fast song going into a 6/8, if he likes LED lights or traditional lighting. I don't
Mike,
know that.
What about screens, Mike? LED screens, buddy.
I don't know what he would think about all this stuff, but I do know he's invited us and told us to do this, to remember him. Acts 2:42 says they devoted themselves to the breaking of bread, right? They devoted.
That Acts chapter 2 passage, there's 4 devotions of the early church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what's funny is in my team and I, we've worked through that a couple times. These were the devotions of the early church.
Yeah.
And we had a long discussion at my church at staff meeting one time. Would anyone come here and think that we're devoted to these things?
Yeah.
What are the devotions of my church?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, is Mike O'Brien, am I a communion guy? Do I feel the Lord and sense him deeply every time I take No, I do not. It's
But
still,
isn't that okay?
I think it's okay.
I kind of think it's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people say, well, we don't want to do it too often because it's special. Well, really, it's special. You just want to do it once a year. Is the sermon special? Is the offering special?
Sure.
Is worship music special?
That rhetorical device can be applied to all kinds of things.
So I would say in the beginning of this, if you feel like as a community you want to lean more into being Eucharistic, you want to be centered around this very significant moment in the church service, read about it. Read, learn, ask a lot of questions, call some Anglicans, right? Why is this important? How can I do it? I would always get scared when I go serve at other churches. Like I would put my guitar pick on the altar and I'd be like, oh, I wonder if that's cool. Or like, throw my mono guitar case up there like, oh, this is the altar, the ladies are about to come prepare the meal here. I would just get a little, and I think some of that weight, we need some of that weight, some of that holiness, some of the space matters, Well,
there's not much, it's interesting. I think movements like the Vineyard exploded because some of these other more historic mainline churches, it just felt maybe overly stuffy or stilted. And so something informal felt really freeing to people.
Yeah.
But then to your point, maybe in our Vineyard or our charismatic stream, is there anything sacred or somber ever?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, have we become too casual?
Yeah.
I'm just asking questions here. I'm not even, this is something I do wonder.
Yeah. We replaced the Eucharist table with a kick drum. We put the kick drum at the center of this and we said, we're going to rock. We are going to sing, which is the sacrament of so many churches now, is singing, which is fantastic, right? It's very formational. But I wonder if there's something formational about this meal that every time we gather, we're just going to have this thing that's kind of equal ground, whether you're an alto, soprano, you love music, you don't like music, bread and wine.
That's right.
The most simple of simple things. The power pyramid is just leveled out. Dude. And we all come to this thing. And, language is important. We invite you to the table. Jesus fed Judas. Jesus fed Peter. What does that mean? Are we policing this? We get caught up in, are we going to police it? And theologically, you got to work that out in your individual context. But I love having a space. It feels very kingdom to me. It's just as powerful as ministry. If you present it well, hey, we welcome you this morning to this table. Jesus welcomes you. Come forward as you're able to receive the feast of Jesus,
Amen.
that he's invited you to. This is powerful. This can transform a church. It feels like a very simple thing. So research about intinction, when you dip the bread in versus the little cups versus the to-go cups, on your way out, grab communion if you like. All these things communicate your value of this. And if you haven't grown up with some weight around it, go spend a weekend at the monastery. Go learn about the most weighty places where they are really hardcore about all the things, and see if maybe you can add some weight to the moment. And worship leaders, I encourage you, don't just leave this up to the suits. Like, I think you can be a part of the conversation in scripture reading, in responsive reading, in prayers, and in the communion. And I'll say this, the who of our worship is ultimately more important than the how, when, who. It's like when you go to a birthday party and you leave the birthday party and you're like, we never said anything to Jim about his birthday. We didn't have a moment for Jim. We didn't say, Jim, it's your birthday. We love you. So many times I go to churches and they haven't sung the name of Jesus in 4 or 5 weeks. It's very easy to do. I mean, look at the CCLI top, whatever. I mean, you don't have to have Jesus in every song, but what are we doing? And communion is Christocentric. You're not going to lose the plot. If you do communion on Sunday,
you kept the plot.
Juice, blood, body, breaking, death.
Yeah, man. Luke 22, just read it. You're good.
There's a little funeral, there's a little wedding in every service. There's a little resurrection, but there's a little cross. There's a little waiting.
Yeah, the whole thing.
So people can come suffering, and the Eucharist is going to be a place for them to go, hey, I'm not alone.
I've told this story a few times, but I just want to tell it again because it links to something you said a moment ago. I was in New York City for an event a few years ago, and I had become, I didn't really know anyone there. I'm not an extrovert, so I'd done a few days of like extroverting with a brand new group of people, and it was great. They couldn't have been better. But I needed to get away, and so I jumped on the train and I went down to this museum, the Whitney Museum of Art. But I had an amazing encounter on the way down that I won't tell, but then on the way back, I had another amazing encounter, which both of these encounters are non-subway encounters. And on my way back, I'm sitting with this young man. I have my headphones in, so I'm not trying to talk to people. And he's asking me about he bumps me and says, he's asking me about what music are you listening to? So we have this quick conversation about music. And then he says, well, what do you do? And I eventually have to tell him I'm a pastor, which is not what I want to do, but I do. And then he tells me essentially, I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in any of that. But then he tells me, he says, but I do go to church every day. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, where so you go into Catholic church? You go into Catholic mass or something? He goes like, yeah, I go before work.
Wow.
And I said, well, why do you, if you don't believe, why are you going? And he says, I've just discovered that I love communion. And I'm like, okay, I'll bite. Why? Why do you love communion? And he said, I just love that it's the one place where we all line up and everybody gets the same thing.
Yeah.
Rich, poor, black, white, Hispanic, upper class, low class, educated, non-educated, right, left. It doesn't matter. Everybody gets the same thing. You get a little piece of bread, you get a little bit of wine, you get the body, you get the blood, you get the cross, you get the resurrection, you get the wedding, you get the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I was so moved when he told me this story.
Yeah.
Because I realized, okay, I've grown up in church and I've never put that together. Isn't that interesting? You know, somebody who doesn't believe understood the weight and the gravity of this moment in a way that I didn't.
Yeah.
And I've never let go of that. Just an amazing moment.
It's incredible.
All right, Mike, let me ask you one more question. This is just something I've noticed from just following your socials. I've noticed you've been leading a lot of worship in acoustic situations. I think historically in the Vineyard, we think, drums, bass, piano, electric guitar, vocalist, maybe a background singer, or if it's like a real fancy schmancy, super cool group of kids, maybe you got an organ player, tons of stuff, right? But I've been seeing you lead more and more in acoustic situations. Talk to me about that. What are the opportunities?
Sure.
Does the congregation mind?
Sure.
People bummed out? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of things. So sometimes you don't have the people, right?
Sometimes you're in a pinch.
You're in a pinch. You don't have a drummer. You don't have a huge band. So you have to lead acoustically. And now by that, I mean one guitar, one vocal, one piano, one vocal, two acoustics, a piano, a guitar, no drum set, no driving feature of a modern worship band. So sometimes you have to, but here's the thing. Even if you have a worship ministry of, at VCC, we had 40 plus people part of the worship ministry, 5 or 6 drummers, and we don't have drummers certain weeks on purpose. We intentionally dial it down. So what does that do? It creates opportunities for people to rest. Obviously, they can just come to church and they can serve. It gives what I believe the most important instrument in modern worship is the congregation.
The voices.
The gathered people is the choir, right? Have you ever had rehearsal and you're like, man, rehearsal was terrible, but church was great? Well, that's because the most important instrument showed up. The people of God, as Paul says, speak to one another, psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. So to one another, right? Like this is the gig. The gig is not happening on the stage. The stage is simply leading the most important instrument. So because of that, you get rid of all these transients, all these voluminous things. The most important instrument becomes
central. Yeah.
So you're exchanging energy. You're taking some of the energy of the band and you're giving it back to the congregation. And if you do it well, the congregation will respond and they will fill in that gap. They'll start to hear themselves sing, "Bless the Lord, oh my soul," and they'll sing louder because they recognize that they're part of something big and great. So that's just kind of some of the value behind it, like intentionally dialing back, and you as a worship leader, you coming at it with just as much vigor, just as much strength, just as much preparation. You're going to plan that set list. You're going to put fast songs in there, and you're going to sing them like a boss, and you're going to play a lot. Normally I'm teaching musicians to stop playing, quit strumming so much, quit bouncing on the piano. But in these situations, your acoustic guitar, your piano, you're going to play all those low notes. You're going to play the fat, bassy notes, and you're going to work with your sound tech and bring back all that low-end information and pump it through the subs. It's going to come out powerfully. It's going to sound awesome.
Yeah.
You got to be intentional about it and sing forward. You sing on top of the lyric. A lot of times we sing back and we kind of let it, but we sing forward. We give confidence to the people to sing. So I love it. I love experimenting with it. I think we need to do it more and find that muscle of just, hey, and in your brain, you don't think of it as any less. Yeah. You give it all you've got.
There's a chance that it even requires for some of us more preparation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Especially if we're coming from that spot where we have really, really great bands.
Yep.
Whereas a worship leader, I can kind of just show up and I know that the drummer and bass player are so good. Like my electric guitar players are so good. I can kind of phone it in. Yeah. I don't mean that in a negative sense. I just mean, I don't even have to really learn how to play the song. As long as I sing it, if I miss a chord, nobody's even going to hear it maybe.
Yeah.
But in these moments, my goodness, we have to be on top of it, right?
Yeah. And you think of how obsessed we are with clicks and tracks and the beat. And do we play it like the recording or not like the recording? Man, you remove all those other variables and you bring it back to the lyric and to the people of God gathering and responding to that lyric. My goodness.
Yeah.
Good, big, awesome things can happen in that space.
Yeah.
You know?
I love it. I love it. I've seen it at our church too. Anytime we dial back instrumentation, it does seem to be a unspoken invitation for people to sing even more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep. And text your band, call your band, tell them to get their buns there. You know,
Yeah, please.
Everybody come. Hey, this is a week off. We need you there. You know, it's not like, it's giving it away to the congregation and then just teaching your band that, you know, we don't really need this. If all this went away, all the technology went away, we lost our electricity, like we would get this thing done.
We're still a worshiping community.
Dude, we would get it done. It's only been, we're 60, 75 years into rock and roll. We're, 150 years into electricity. Like this thing can happen without all this gadget tree,
Amen.
So.
Amen. Love that. Love it. All right, Mike. Dude, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, thanks for what you're doing. And thanks for leading the Vineyard and thinking about training up and developing the people that God's given to us.
Absolutely. Yeah, send your, we've got lots of incredible opportunities for training. Our world is at vsow.org, vsow.org. And we're part of Vineyard Worship, but that's just kind of a separate page where we're training their sound techs. We're training our worship leaders at different age groups. We have different opportunities. So it's just an honor to serve people. The whole church is invited. It's not just a Vineyard thing. Like wherever you're at, if you need training and help, we're going to continue to provide space for that.
That's good. Hey, Mike, will you do this? Before I ask you the last question, will you just tell people maybe the next 3 training opportunities that we have coming up?
Yeah. So January 2020 in Atlanta, we have our Sound Lab.
Who's that for?
Happening. Sound Lab's for your sound tech.
Yes. Should a worship leader come?
A worship leader can and should come. You could accompany your sound tech or tech. Some people bring their whole team. We've seen increasingly just musicians on the team. They're kind of gearheads. It speaks to them, right? So we set up a bunch of digital soundboards and we network them all together. We have virtual mixes. We worship together. And then after we worship together, we break down the mix. Here's the drums. Here's why we did it on the drums. It is so fun and exciting. We do microphone building things. We talk about acoustics. We have workshops and breakouts. We do it all in about 48 hours.
That's wonderful.
And it's worth an airplane ticket. So we're going to do it in Atlanta.
That's a cheap flight.
An airplane ticket.
It's a cheap flight too.
It is.
Atlanta's easy to get to.
And we have limited host homes, so it's very much like it's just a community, and it's growing. Last year in Columbus, we had almost 100 people.
That blew my mind. 100 people showed up for sound training.
Yeah.
Yeah, so underserved.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and then in March, I believe, we'll have our band lab.
Where's that at?
Justin Law's place up in Minneapolis. If you're within 10 hours, I would say, rent a van, put your band in that van, and bring them to Minneapolis.
And what's the heart behind this event?
We want to train the whole team. So we're going to get the team to think together as a cohesive unit. So we'll have some big picture values thing of why a modern worship team matters today, why it matters biblically, but really then break it up practically. Like bass players, how can you up your game a few notches, right?
So really this is about learning how to play together.
Yeah. Bass,
Amen.
drums, utility instruments. We'll cover a lot of ground. It'll be great for your team, a great team building exercise, and the cost will be really low to get everybody
Well, that's
there.
cool because one observation about that, Mike, you and I grew up playing in bands.
Yeah.
Like garage bands. So we have like rock and roll muscle memory.
Yeah.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our people who show up to play, they're not playing in rock bands on the side or something.
Yeah, and really getting people to think, not just replicating what they hear, but what is the drum part that makes sense in this room?
Owning it for our community.
Yeah, in the rented YMCA, that version does not make sense.
Or even, the modern worship thing where we go quarters on the kick and then eights and then 16 smashes, Maybe in the no acoustic treatment YMCA, that's the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, and then in the summers, we've got our summer session, which is for ages 18 to 35. It's a 5-day deep dive into worship ministry.
Yeah.
We have our Rise events throughout the year, which is 12 to 18 years old, which is like the band lab. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
They're incredible. They're so good, right? It's that missing,
Yes.
that hidden group that we're going after. So many good things. And
Thrive.
Thrive.
Throw a
Yeah,
little
we just
commercial
started.
for Thrive.
We just started Thrive, which is an all ages training. So if summer session you're outside of that age group, Thrive is a 48-hour event, which is another deep dive into worship ministry, where we talk theology, biblical theology of worship, Vineyard values, kingdom values in worship, and then all the practical stuff.
Yeah, just a refresher.
Choose your own adventure. I need to get deeper in set lists and understanding administration. I am a nightmare. I need to go spend.
I think of Thrive as continuing education.
Yeah.
And the way a doctor might continue to go get educated about the things that are happening in their field, this is a way for Vineyard worship leaders to continue to be honed.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, one last question. And by the way, this is a new season of the Ferment. So we have a new last question.
Oh man, I planned the old question.
Bro, this is jujitsu. Yeah, dude, this is jujitsu. I'm doing jujitsu here. So this is what I'm interested in. Mike, can you tell me in any way you want to do this? Talk to me about what's your dream right now? What's a dream that's alive in your heart? And it doesn't have to be connected to worship either. What's a dream that you have right now?
Yeah. A dream in my heart right now in this season is I've just returned back to this church that I was a part of for 20 years. I left that place for about 3.5 years. I was gone, and I now returned, and it's a new pastor and a new day.
Yeah.
It's a different church than the one I left.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of remnants of who I was. And so I dream of being back at this church and really, any local church, just being part of a local church that is a place where that little Mike came, when I went to that little Presbyterian church as a kid. I want to create a space and a place for the little Mikeys, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think like an evangelist often, but that part of my heart does, of like, who is lost, who needs God, who needs community right now. And just creating a space for that. I love it. I've missed it being on the road. So many people are, Mike, that's so awesome. You get to be on the road and teach and train and travel. And it is fantastic. It is intoxicating to be doing that. But the local church, small group, and crumbs on the floor, and somebody brought free donuts, and just like church.
Yeah.
I love church. I love being in community like that. So my dream is to be in a healthy, sustainable community like that, and to be creating music, to have an old Hammond organ in the corner, cranking out jams, to have diverse voices, singing and engaging, and just, my kid growing up in a church and family, it seems obvious, but that's a dream,
That's a great dream. Man, thanks for sharing. All right, everybody. Hey, listen, if you need help with your teams, one of the people you can reach out to is Mike O'Brien. And if you want to know how to do that, just go to vsow, the website there. That will point you in the right direction. Mike, thanks for having this conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yep, peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Coram here, producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you about our Sing Together conference in Nashville, Tennessee from March 26th through 28th. It's going to be a great time and we hope to see you there. For more information, go to vineyardworship.com. All right, people. See you next time. Peace.